We walked here. Mama said to find you if anything happened. The snow didn't fall in a storm. It drifted gently, layering the city in silence, like the sky itself was mourning, but didn't want to disturb anyone. Outside the towering glass building that bore his name, two children stood motionless beneath a flickering streetlight. They were not begging. They were not crying. Just waiting. Isaiah Coleman stepped out of his black Escalade, the chrome door closing with a soft, hollow click. His charcoal gray suit was immaculate, his movements measured, his face unreadable. He walked toward the lobby with the indifference of a man who had nothing left to chase. But then, Mama died this morning. We got nowhere to go. He froze mid-step. The voice was small, clear, not pleading, just honest. He turned slowly. Two girls stood there. The older one, maybe 9, stood tall despite the cold, her shoulders squared like someone who'd learned early not to expect kindness. Her coat was torn at the sleeve. Her shoes soaked through. Beside her stood a much smaller girl, 5 at most, clutching a ragged stuffed bunny with one ear missing and snow gathering in her lashes. Isaiah blinked. "Are you Mr. Coleman?" "Yes," he said cautiously. "Mama said to find you. She said you helped her once, when she was cold. You gave her tea." The words landed like a stone in his chest. He hadn't thought of that moment in years, had barely remembered it himself. Just a simple gesture in a hallway years ago. A paper cup. A human instinct. But somehow, someone had remembered. Isaiah looked around. No adults, no caseworkers, no winter coats packed with emergency contacts. Just 2 children, and the weight of a promise made by a dying woman. He opened his mouth, then paused. He wasn't good at speaking. Hadn't been for a long time. 2 security guards had begun to approach, alarmed by the scene. Isaiah raised a hand, halting them without a word. "Come inside," he said, voice low. "At the very least, you need to be warm." He turned and walked toward the doors, not looking to see if they followed. But they did. The older one took the younger's hand, and the 2 followed him into the building like they'd just stepped from one world into another. The elevator rose in silence. Floor after floor fell away until they reached the 48th, his penthouse. A space of minimalist steel and glass that overlooked the lights of Chicago like a man staring down at a city he no longer belonged to. He didn't say much as he helped them out of their wet coats. He didn't ask many questions. He just wrapped them in thick towels and quietly prepared 2 mugs of cocoa, one with extra marshmallows. "What are your names?" he asked softly. "Zuri," the younger girl whispered, still clutching her bunny. "I'm Amira," the older one replied. "I'm her sister." They sat on the long couch near the fireplace, steam rising from their mugs, legs curled up like they didn't want to take up too much space. Isaiah sat across from them, elbows on knees, staring into the fire. "Mama told us if anything ever happened, we had to find you," Amira said. "Why me?" "Because you didn't look away. When she fainted once in the hallway, you stopped. You gave her tea. She said you were the only one who didn't pretend she was invisible." Isaiah stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. The city below glittered with apathy. Cars streamed through intersections, lights blinked in boardrooms, and no one knew what was unfolding 48 stories above them. He saw his reflection in the glass. Claire, his wife, had died 4 years ago. Cancer. Their son, Julian, gone 6 months later in a senseless car crash. Since then, Isaiah had withdrawn from the world, into silence, into shadows, into spreadsheets and charitable endowments he never visited in person. But now, behind him, 2 children slept on his couch. They hadn't come for money. They hadn't come for pity. They had come because a mother had once whispered, "If anything ever happens, find the man who stayed." He turned slowly. The girls were curled together under the throw blanket, Zuri's tiny fingers still holding her sister's sleeve even in sleep. Isaiah stepped forward, quietly. Then, without a word, he rested a hand on Amira's head. It was clumsy, unpracticed, like a man relearning the art of being human. That night, he didn't sleep. He stood in the hallway outside the living room, leaning against the wall with the lights dimmed. He didn't move, didn't speak. And when the silence became too loud to bear, he whispered to himself, not as a vow, but as a realization. They didn't come asking for help. They came because they believed I was the last person who wouldn't leave. Morning broke gently across the skyline. The city awoke with sirens and steel, unaware that something fragile had settled into the penthouse above it, like a bird nesting in the rafters of a cathedral. Isaiah Coleman stood barefoot in his kitchen, watching the espresso drip. He didn't drink coffee anymore, but routine, like grief, had its rituals. In the adjacent room, muffled under layers of warmth, Zuri murmured in her sleep, one arm flung over Amira. Her stuffed bunny was propped on a pillow like a silent guardian. Isaiah stared at them for a long time. It wasn't the first time children had been in that apartment, but it was the first time in years. There had once been tiny shoes in the hallway, a drawer full of colored pencils, crayon scribbles on the underside of the kitchen island he never repainted. That drawer was still there. The scribbles, too. But the boy who drew them was not. Julian had been 7 when he died, and Isaiah still remembered the sound the hospital machines made as they flatlined, not because they were loud, but because they were final. He hadn't opened that memory in a long time, and now 2 strangers slept on his couch, as if the world hadn't already shattered him once. He poured the espresso down the drain. By late morning, Amira was up, not with the sleepy confusion of a guest, but the tight posture of someone used to waking with responsibility. "Where are we?" she asked, not afraid, just assessing. "My home," Isaiah replied. "You live here alone?" Isaiah nodded. Amira didn't pry. Instead, she glanced toward the kitchen, saw the stove unused, and without a word began scanning for a pan. Not to be helpful, but because hunger was real and asking was a luxury. "You don't need to cook," Isaiah said. "We always cook. Mama said never to expect things." Isaiah opened a cupboard and handed her a bowl. "Today," he said quietly, "you can expect breakfast." He cracked 3 eggs, added milk, pepper, cheese. Zuri stirred when the scent reached her and wandered in, rubbing her eyes. "Are we in heaven?" she asked groggily, then pointed to the refrigerator. "Mama said rich people have cold boxes that make ice from nothing." Isaiah chuckled, the sound awkward in his own throat. He knelt to open the freezer and handed her a single ice cube. She squealed, holding it like a jewel. "Tastes like water," she declared, then hugged his leg. Isaiah froze for just a moment, then slowly, gently, placed a hand on her back. It had been so long since someone had touched him without reason, without needing something, without fear, just trust. Later, as the girls ate in silence, Amira looked up suddenly. "You don't remember Mama, do you?" Isaiah hesitated. "Not well," he said. Just that she worked in the East Tower. I think janitorial night shift? Amira nodded. She said one night she fainted in the hallway near the elevators. She was freezing. You walked past, then came back. You gave her a cup of tea. Isaiah remembered. A paper cup. A woman slumped near a supply closet, soaked from the snow, face pale. He had handed her the tea he brought for himself, waited until she could stand, then left without asking her name. He hadn't thought of it since. She said you didn't say much, Amira continued, but she never forgot. She said you were the only person in that building who saw her. Isaiah looked down at his hands. He had built this company with silence, led with numbers, not speeches, gave donations but never attended galas. He had vanished from his own life, turned his pain into glass walls and financial reports. He thought silence was safety. But now it echoed. That afternoon, he opened the drawer he hadn't touched in 4 years. Inside, Julian's old drawing pad, faded sketches of dinosaurs, rockets, a crayon family with mismatched limbs and giant smiles. He pulled one sheet out and stared. Then, without fully knowing why, he walked it to the girls' room, the guest room he had cleared for them, and placed it on the nightstand. Zuri saw it later and gasped. "Who drew this?" "My son," Isaiah said. Amira looked up, something tightening in her face. "You had a boy?" Isaiah nodded. "He was about your age. He died in an accident." Neither girl said a word. Zuri simply touched the drawing with reverence. Amira lowered her eyes. "We don't talk about dying. Mama said the people we love deserve to be spoken of like they're still around." Isaiah's breath caught. That night, when the apartment fell into its usual stillness, Isaiah didn't retreat to his bedroom. He sat in the hallway again, back against the wall, knees pulled to his chest. It wasn't fear this time. It was gravity. Something was pulling him back into the orbit of the living. These girls hadn't just come into his home. They had stepped into a space he had sealed off. And the strange part was, he didn't want to shut the door again. He pulled his phone from his pocket, opened the contact list, scrolled past names he never called, until he found one. Julian. Voicemail. He hit play. The voice of his son, young and scratchy, filled the empty hall. "Hi, Daddy. I drew a new rocket ship today. This one has room for everyone. No one gets left behind." Isaiah closed his eyes and whispered, barely audible, "Maybe that includes me, too." Mama said, "Don't be a burden." Night came quickly over the skyline, not as a blanket, but as a silence that crept between buildings, wrapped around windows, and settled into the corners of Isaiah Coleman's apartment like it had been there before. In a way, it had. Isaiah moved through his home like a man afraid to disturb something delicate. He found extra blankets, unfamiliar with which were softest, and brought out pillows still in plastic wrap. Zuri, having claimed the plush armchair in the living room, was already half asleep, thumb in mouth, bunny in arms. Amira stayed standing, not just awake, alert. "You can lie down, Amira," Isaiah said gently. "Not yet." "Why not?" She looked him straight in the eye. "Someone has to stay awake, in case she wakes up scared." Isaiah didn't answer at first. He simply stood there, holding a folded blanket in his arms, suddenly unsure if he was the adult in the room. "You've done this before," he said. Amira nodded and looked away. "Mama worked night shifts. Sometimes Zuri would get sick, or cry for her. So, I stayed up." There was no pride in her voice, no resentment either, just matter of fact, like a child reciting multiplication tables. Isaiah placed the blanket over Zuri, careful not to disturb her. "You don't have to do that anymore," he said softly. "I don't know how to stop," Amira replied. That answer struck him deeper than he expected. Later, Isaiah made grilled cheese, slightly burnt, unevenly buttered, but warm. Amira accepted hers with a quiet, "Thank you," then sat cross-legged on the floor, eating with her eyes fixed on the crackling fireplace. "You ever been in a house this high up?" he asked. She shook her head. "We've never even been in a building with carpet before." Isaiah looked at her, not in pity, but in something slower. He remembered the first time Julian had seen snowfall from the penthouse window. He'd pressed his hands against the glass and whispered, "It looks like the clouds are falling apart." Now, years later, another child sat in that same spot, not to marvel at clouds, but to survive the night. He sat down beside her, close, but not too close. "Your mom," he began. "She seemed like someone who loved deeply." Amira looked down at her sandwich. "She was tired, but she always tucked us in, even if it was morning for her." "Did she talk about your father?" Amira stiffened. "Zuri's dad wasn't mine. Mine, I don't know. Mama said he left before I could walk. Zuri's dad stayed longer, but not long enough." She swallowed hard. "She used to say, 'Some people don't know how to stay. It's not always their fault. But it still hurts.'" Isaiah looked into the fire. That sentence, it carved something in him. Some people don't know how to stay. He had left too. Not physically, but emotionally, quietly. When grief hollowed him out, and all he could do was build walls, skyscrapers, foundations, sealed doors. He had been the man who disappeared, from birthdays, from friends, from life itself. Zuri stirred in her sleep, whimpering. Amira rose instantly, blanket in hand, and rushed to her side. She whispered something into her sister's ear, ran a hand down her hair, and sang softly, a tune so old and quiet that even the fire seemed to hush. Isaiah watched from the shadows. He had seen boardrooms break under pressure, investors collapse under risk. But he had never seen resilience wrapped in something so small, so gentle. Amira was not just a sister. She was a protector. After Zuri calmed, Amira turned, saw Isaiah still watching, and hesitated. "She says weird stuff in her sleep," Amira explained. "Sometimes, things Mama said." "What kind of things?" Amira took a breath, then repeated it flatly. "Mama said, 'Don't be a burden. Don't ask for things. Be small. Be good.'" Isaiah closed his eyes. How many children had been taught to shrink themselves just to survive? "She doesn't have to be small here," he said. "Neither do you." Amira looked at him, and for a second the firelight caught something wet in her eyes. She blinked it away. "Mama said you were the only one who didn't look past her." "I didn't think she noticed." "She noticed everything. That's why we're here." Hours passed. Isaiah lay in his bedroom, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. And then, a soft knock. He opened the door. Amira stood there, barefoot, eyes down. "Can I just sit? I don't want to sleep yet." He nodded and stepped aside. She didn't climb into the bed, just sat on the floor, knees to chest, back against the wall. "I don't think I'm scared," she whispered. I just don't know what happens tomorrow. Isaiah sat down beside her on the carpet. They didn't speak. For a long time, they just sat there, a child too strong for her age, and a man who once built everything except a place where people could stay. And then quietly, Amira said, Mama always said, we don't need much, just someone who stays. Isaiah turned to her. She didn't mean it as a request. It was a truth and a test. He didn't answer with words. He just remained beside her until her breathing slowed and her head slumped gently onto his shoulder. That night, Isaiah didn't dream, but for the first time in years, he didn't dread the morning either. The next morning, Isaiah sat at the kitchen island, a pen frozen in his hand, staring at a government form titled Petition for Temporary Guardianship. It felt like signing a lease on something far more fragile than property. Not a transaction, but a quiet declaration. I choose to stay. He wasn't used to choosing anymore. Amira sat nearby, quietly folding napkins into careful triangles. Zuri, still in her mismatched pajamas, colored a picture of a house with 3 stick figures. She drew herself holding Isaiah's hand. She didn't ask permission. The knock at the door came precisely at 9:00 a.m. Isaiah opened it to 2 caseworkers from Child Protective Services. Polite, professional, slightly suspicious. The woman, Ms. Harper, introduced herself. The man, younger, carried a clipboard with hollow formality. They walked in, looked around, took quiet notes. The girls have been with you for how long, Mr. Coleman? Since yesterday morning, Isaiah replied. And you are related? No. A pause. Scribbling. And how did they arrive here? Isaiah turned to Amira, who stood beside him without flinching. Mama told us to find him, she said clearly. She died yesterday. She said he helped her once and that he wouldn't leave us. Ms. Harper's expression softened, but the young man only wrote faster. Do you have any legal documentation of parental intent? No, Isaiah said. Any record of prior relationship? No. The words felt like they were meant to shrink him, reduce this moment into a list of disqualifications. But Isaiah stayed silent, unblinking. Mr. Coleman, Ms. Harper said gently, this may still be considered unauthorized custodial care. We'll need to evaluate the safety of the placement. He nodded once. You're welcome to inspect every room. Speak with them freely. And contact my lawyer. He's filing for emergency guardianship. They exchanged looks, then moved deeper into the apartment. Isaiah knelt beside Zuri, who was now humming to herself and drawing stars. They might ask you some questions, okay? Is this like school? Sort of. Do I have to be good? Just be you, he said. She grinned. I'm already good. The inspection was thorough. Questions were asked. Zuri talked about ice cubes. Amira, poised and articulate, answered everything with the calm of someone used to protecting others. Still, the caseworkers weren't the ones Isaiah feared. That came later. At 3:17 p.m., a man arrived in a cheap leather jacket and bitterness behind his eyes. Name's Victor Hayes, he said, standing in the hallway like it belonged to him. I was married to their mother, legally. That makes me family. Isaiah froze. Amira stood behind him, her entire frame tense. I was their stepfather, Victor continued. I've got every right to take them home. Isaiah stepped forward, calm but sharp. They're not going anywhere. Victor smirked. You think money makes you a guardian? You some kind of savior now?
I was there before you. Amira's voice cut through. You hit her. Victor turned. What did you say? You hit Mama. And you left. The room held its breath. Ms. Harper stepped between them quickly. Mr. Hayes, we'll need documentation of your custody status. Until then, the children remain under protective care. Victor's eyes narrowed at Isaiah. This isn't over. You're playing house with what ain't yours. Isaiah didn't raise his voice. He just looked the man in the eye and said slowly, As long as I'm breathing, these girls will never end up in your hands. That night, Amira didn't eat much. She sat on the balcony wrapped in one of Isaiah's old coats, staring out at the skyline. He joined her with 2 mugs of chamomile tea, though he knew she might not touch hers. He used to come back sometimes, Amira said, like a storm, loud, then gone. Did you ever feel safe? She shook her head. Mama would tell Zuri he was just tired, that things would change, but they didn't. Isaiah stayed quiet. She finally left him. We moved into a shelter, then into that little apartment near the Blue Line station. She was strong. She was tired. Isaiah looked out at the lights blinking across the city. Somewhere below, lawyers were already drawing up defenses. Somewhere else, Victor was plotting his return. But here, on this balcony, under a sky that finally felt still, was the only moment that mattered. Do you think, Amira whispered, that ghosts live in people, not just places? Isaiah turned to her. I think ghosts show up where love is missing. She looked down into her tea. I don't want to be a ghost. Isaiah reached out not to pull her into a hug, but to place his hand gently over hers. You're not. You're here. And I see you. She didn't cry, but her fingers curled slightly under his. And in that small gesture, nothing grand, nothing loud, the war between paper rights and living souls took one more step toward the truth. Some people leave, but some stay. The sky over Chicago was gray that morning, not the harsh gray of storms, but the quiet kind that made people whisper without knowing why. Isaiah woke early, long before the girls stirred. The apartment was silent, but not empty. Something had shifted. The air carried the weight of presence, not absence. He walked past the kitchen island where Zuri had left her drawing of a crooked house with 3 smiling stick figures. Crayons still scattered. One of them broken. The red one. He picked it up and placed it gently in the drawer. He didn't know why he cared, but he did. Amira was sitting cross-legged on the couch, a folded bundle in her lap. It was the quilt her mother had sewn from old clothes, faded pinks, soft blues, a corner stitched with uneven stars. Zuri wet the blanket, she said quietly. I was going to wash it, but I felt something. She unfolded the bottom seam. Tucked inside, stitched into the lining with deliberate care, was an envelope. Isaiah stepped forward as Amira opened it, hands steady. The letter was written in blue ink, the paper worn, the edges frayed. It had clearly been handled many times before ever being sealed. Amira didn't read aloud. She just held it in her hands, mouth trembling, eyes locked on the lines. Then she handed it to Isaiah. He took it as if it might break. To whoever finds this, if I'm gone, it means something went wrong before I could fix it. I've made mistakes. I know that. But I never stopped loving them. Amira is the oldest. She's strong, but she carries too much. Zuri is sweet, and too young to know she deserves to be protected. Please, if you're reading this, keep them together. Don't split them up. Don't let them feel invisible like I did growing up. Don't let them disappear into a system that forgets names. Don't let them repeat the life I was handed. Let them write something better. Thank you. Nadine Isaiah sat still for a long time. The letter trembled slightly in his fingers, not from cold, but from memory. Claire had written him a note once, folded it into his coat the night she shaved her head after the second round of chemo. You don't have to fix the world, Zay. Just don't leave the parts that need you. He hadn't read that note in years, but somehow it echoed now. He stood, crossed the room, and did something he hadn't done in 4 years. He opened the storage cabinet in the hallway. Inside, canvas bags, sealed boxes, a single picture frame wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it. It was a photo of Claire and Julian at the lake. Sunlight on their faces, Julian holding a fishing rod too big for his arms. Isaiah stared at it for a long time. Then, with deliberate hands, he hung it on the living room wall, right above where the girls had left their shoes. That afternoon, he cooked. Not scrambled eggs, not toast, but a real breakfast. Buttermilk pancakes like the kind Julian used to request every Sunday. Bacon crispy just the way Claire used to hate. Maple syrup warmed on the stove, not microwaved. He even pulled out a chipped ceramic plate, one he hadn't used since the accident. Zuri came skipping in first, still in her socks. "It smells like cartoons," she said. Amira followed, slower, more cautious. She stared at the plate of pancakes like it might vanish. "You made this?" she asked. "Used to," Isaiah said. "Stopped for a while. Thought I forgot how." "You didn't." They ate quietly. But Isaiah noticed Amira kept looking at the photo on the wall. She didn't ask who it was, didn't comment. But he saw her notice it. He wanted her to. That evening, after the dishes were done and Zuri was asleep, Isaiah found Amira sitting in the hallway, quilt in her lap, the envelope still beside her. He sat down next to her, knees bent, hands clasped. "She really loved us," Amira said, "even when she couldn't show it. I know she did." "She did," Isaiah said. "Then why didn't she leave sooner?" He took a long breath. "Because sometimes people think surviving is loving. They think enduring something for you is the same as protecting you, but it's not. It's just surviving." Amira nodded, eyes wet. "I used to think maybe if I was quieter, she'd have more room to breathe. If I took care of Zuri, she could sleep longer." "You're a child, Amira." "Not really." "Yes, really." He didn't say it like a scolding. He said it like a prayer. Then, after a moment, he reached into the inside pocket of his blazer and pulled out a small, leather-bound journal. "Julian used to write notes in here," he said. "Mostly scribbles, dinosaur facts, math jokes I didn't understand." He handed it to her. "It's okay if you don't want it. I just thought you might want to write things too." Amira took it like it was sacred. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded. "Your mother's letter. It didn't say who to give you to. It didn't name anyone. But she still believed someone would do it right." Amira looked at him. "Do you think she meant you?" Isaiah's voice was quiet. "I don't know. But I want to be." She leaned her head against his shoulder, not asking for permission. He let her. That night, as the apartment darkened, a quilt stitched with memory lay across 2 sleeping girls, and a picture long buried now glowed in the warm light of a standing lamp. Isaiah stood at the window again, but he wasn't alone anymore. Not in the room, not in his thoughts. He whispered aloud to the empty glass, "I'm not fixing the world. just staying with the parts that still need me. The courtroom smelled like cold wood and old stories. Isaiah had been in thousands of rooms before. Conference halls, boardrooms, auditoriums full of eyes watching his every word. He'd signed billion-dollar deals in under 10 minutes. He once addressed the World Economic Forum with no notes. But he had never been this nervous. Not when Claire got sick. Not even when Julian's heartbeat stopped on the monitor. This was different. Because this wasn't about closing a deal. This was about holding on. Zuri swung her legs from the hallway bench, humming to herself as she colored inside the lines of a handout someone gave her. Amira sat still, back straight, wearing a navy dress Isaiah bought the day before. She looked older than 9, not in height, in silence. "Are you scared?" Isaiah asked gently. "I just want to go home," Amira said. "This is your home." She blinked but said nothing. Inside, the courtroom was quiet. The judge was an older woman with hair pulled tight and glasses perched low on her nose. She had the face of someone who had seen too many custody battles and too few victories for the children caught in them. Isaiah stood tall. His lawyer, Mr. Brandt, was sharp, calm, and well-prepared. Across from them, Victor Hayes sat with a court-appointed attorney who seemed more interested in procedure than people. "We are here to determine temporary custody," the judge said. "Mr. Coleman, as a non-relative, your petition is unusual. Please speak." Isaiah stepped forward. "Your Honor," he began. "The girl's mother, Nadine Ross, left no formal will, but she left intent. In her final moments, she told them to find me, and they did." "On what basis?" the judge asked. "Years ago, I helped her once. Nothing significant, a gesture, but it was enough for her to believe I wouldn't turn them away." "And do you intend to care for them permanently?" Isaiah didn't hesitate. "Yes, if they'll let me." There was a murmur in the courtroom. Victor's lawyer stood. "Objection, Your Honor. My client is the legal stepfather of both girls. He has documentation of marriage and prior residence with the family. Mr. Coleman is attempting to purchase guardianship with influence and wealth." Isaiah didn't react, but Amira's hands tightened in her lap. The lawyer continued. "Mr. Coleman runs multiple corporations, travels frequently, and has no experience raising children. This is not a home. It's a penthouse with staff and marble counters. The girls need stability, not sympathy." The judge turned. "Ms. Ross," she said, "would you like to speak?" Amira stood. Her shoes made a soft sound on the polished floor. "Your Honor," she said, voice clear, "he didn't buy us. He didn't even offer us food right away. He just opened the door. That's all he did." She paused. "He's the first person who didn't ask what we could give him, or what was wrong with us. He just stayed." The courtroom stilled. "Mama said," she continued, "that being loved doesn't mean you get rescued. It means someone keeps showing up." And he did. There was nothing theatrical in her words, just truth. Pure, unadorned truth. The judge looked down at her papers, then at Isaiah, then at Victor. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "your history of police involvement, domestic incident reports, and lack of steady employment weigh heavily. Until the court can determine long-term custody, I'm granting temporary guardianship to Mr. Coleman. 60 days. Review hearing to follow." Victor slammed his hand on the bench. "You can't just hand them over to a stranger." "They already chose," the judge replied, not unkindly. "And he's no longer a stranger." Outside the courtroom, Isaiah leaned against the wall, exhaling like he'd held his breath for hours. Amira came to stand beside him. "You okay?" she asked. He looked at her, this child with the spine of steel and voice of wind. "I should be asking you that." She shrugged. "We've had worse." Isaiah crouched to her level.
Amira, what you said in there, that took courage. Mama used to say, if you whisper the truth, the wrong people don't hear it, so you gotta say it loud. He smiled, not broadly, but deeply. Do you want to get lunch? She nodded. Zuri likes mac and cheese shaped like dinosaurs. And you? I like when Zuri eats all of hers and says she's full, so I can finish what's left. Isaiah laughed. The sound was raw, genuine. It felt like it had come from a place long boarded up. As they stepped into the sunlight, Zuri skipping between them, Isaiah realized he hadn't just defended two girls. He had defended his own chance at redemption. The first sign that something was different came in a plain white envelope. No return address, no name. Just 4 words written in a hesitant hand. For Zuri Ross, please. Isaiah found it in the mailbox of the penthouse, a place usually reserved for contracts, newsletters from non-profits he funded but never visited, and luxury catalogs he never opened. He turned the envelope over twice, held it to the light, and finally placed it in the inside pocket of his coat. He didn't open it. Not yet. He waited. That afternoon, the intercom buzzed. The security guard's voice crackled through. "Mr. Coleman, there's someone here asking to speak with you. Says his name is Desmond Ross." Isaiah's heart dropped. He glanced toward the living room where Zuri sat building towers from cereal boxes, and Amira was folding laundry into neat little squares like they were currency. "Send him up," he said after a pause. The elevator took too long. When the doors finally opened, Isaiah wasn't sure what he expected. But it wasn't this. Desmond Ross was a man in his late 30s, clean-shaven, eyes sunken but kind. He didn't wear the rage that Victor Hayes did. He didn't reek of entitlement. He wore something heavier: regret. He stepped in slowly, as if the room itself might judge him. "Thank you for not turning me away," Desmond said. Isaiah nodded but didn't offer a seat. "You're Zuri's biological father?" "Yes, sir." "Why now?" Desmond looked at the ground. "Because her mother didn't want me around, and I didn't fight hard enough to stay." Silence. "I was young," he continued. "I thought I had more time. Thought I could fix myself first. I didn't know she was sick again. I didn't know she was dying. I found out 2 days ago, through someone at the shelter." Isaiah crossed his arms. "And you're here to claim custody?" Desmond looked up, eyes wide. "No, God, no. I just want to leave her something. A letter. I won't ask to see her. I need her to know I didn't disappear because she wasn't worth staying for." Isaiah studied the man in front of him. His voice didn't shake, but his hands did. He reached into his coat and pulled out the envelope. "This?" Desmond nodded. "Yes." "What's in it?" "Just words. Not enough of them, but all I've got." Isaiah hesitated, then asked, "Why should I give this to her?" Desmond didn't flinch. "Because she's yours now, but she's also still part of me. And I want the part I broke to know it wasn't her fault." Isaiah stood in silence for a long time. Then he walked to the window, back turned. "Do you want to see her?" "Only if she wants to see me." Later that evening, Isaiah sat down with Zuri,
holding the envelope gently like it contained something fragile. "Zuri," he said, "someone left you a letter today." She looked up. "From Mama?" "No. From someone who knew Mama. Someone who knew you, too." Zuri took the envelope, turning it in her hands. "Can I open it?" "You don't have to." "But I can?" "Yes." She nodded, then paused. "Are you scared?" "A little." She smiled. "Me too." She opened the letter and began to read. Her lips didn't move, but her breath hitched halfway through. When she was done, she folded it back up and held it close to her chest. "Did he say he loved me?" she asked. "He did," Isaiah said. "More than once." Zuri nodded. Then softly, "I think I believe him." An hour later, she surprised Isaiah by asking, "Can I meet him?" Isaiah blinked. "If you want." "I don't know what to say, but I don't want to wonder." So they arranged it. In the lobby, neutral ground. Desmond arrived wearing the same clothes, hands shaking. When Zuri stepped off the elevator, she held Isaiah's hand the whole way. She looked up at Desmond, then at the letter in her other hand. "Are you him?" she asked. "Yes," Desmond said. "Okay." She didn't cry. She didn't hug him. She just nodded. "You can go now. I'm not mad." Desmond's knees almost gave out. "Thank you," he whispered. Zuri turned back to Isaiah and whispered something into his coat pocket. He bent down. She cupped her hand to his ear and said, "I still want you to be my forever grown-up. Is that okay?" Isaiah's throat closed. "That's more than okay." They walked back to the elevator together. As the doors closed, Desmond raised a hand in farewell. Zuri raised her bunny, and in the space between them, no words, just air, something let go. Not forgotten, but forgiven. The day began like any other. Cereal on the counter, mismatched socks, cartoons humming softly in the background. Zuri danced between the kitchen stools, bunny in one arm, juice box in the other. Amira sat at the island with her spelling homework, brows furrowed, tongue poking from the corner of her mouth like she was solving national security. Isaiah, in a hoodie and old jeans, something Julian had once called his weekend dad uniform, was flipping pancakes with more confidence than skill. "These are too brown," Zuri giggled. "They're golden," Isaiah replied. "Mama said golden means burned." Isaiah raised an eyebrow. "Then your mama never ate my pancakes." Zuri stuck out her tongue. "That's because she liked hers edible." Amira stifled a laugh. Isaiah smiled, not politely, not out of effort, but like something natural had returned to his face. A muscle he hadn't used in years had learned how to live again. At school drop-off, Zuri insisted on carrying her lunchbox herself. "I'm big now," she said, skipping ahead. Isaiah walked behind with Amira. She no longer needed to grip his hand when crossing streets, but sometimes she still did. "Will you be here when we get back?" she asked. "Where else would I be?" he said. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. It was the kind of answer she was still learning to trust. That afternoon, the apartment was unusually quiet. Isaiah had spent the time rearranging bookshelves, not because they needed it, but because he couldn't sit still. He found Julian's old sketch pad again, tucked behind a stack of architecture magazines. Inside, a drawing of a treehouse with a slide that wrapped around like a spiral staircase. "One day we'll build it," Julian had said. He never did. But now, Isaiah traced the lines with his finger and wondered. Maybe not a treehouse, but something. A home made of something stronger than wood, made of presence. When the girls returned, Zuri came barreling through the door first, arms wide. "You're here!" she shouted. "Where else would I be?" Isaiah repeated, smiling. "Daddy, look what I made!" The word hit the room like a warm wind, not shouted, not tested, just spoken, casual, unthinking, real. Zuri ran over and held up a glitter-covered paper crown made from yellow construction paper. "It's for you, because you're the king of our house." Amira froze in the doorway, eyes wide. Isaiah didn't move for a moment. Then he crouched down slowly, looked Zuri in the eyes and said, "Is that what I am?" Zuri nodded. "Kings don't leave." He took the crown, placed it gently on his head, glitter and all. "Then I better learn how to rule." Amira set her backpack down. "She didn't mean to say it," she whispered. She can call me whatever she wants," Isaiah said softly. "So can you." Amira looked down, then back up. "I might need more time." "You have all the time you need." That night, Zuri drew a picture. 3 figures under a crooked tree. 1 tall, 2 small, all smiling. Above them the words, "Our Family, King Version." Isaiah laughed when he saw it. Then, without a word, he took a magnet and placed it on the refrigerator, next to Julian's rocket ship drawing, next to Amira's folded paper crane, next to a sticky note that just said, "Remember to stay." The kitchen light flickered slightly, like it too was learning to soften. Isaiah stood there for a long time, watching the fridge door like it held the story of his life. Not a story of loss anymore, but one of becoming. Later that night, Zuri curled into his lap during a bedtime story. Her head rested on his chest, her voice muffled in his hoodie. "You don't have to be my real daddy," she whispered. "Just my always one." Isaiah pressed his lips to the top of her head. "Then that's what I'll be." The courtroom looked the same. Same wooden pews, same judge with her glasses low and her pen sharp, but this time Isaiah didn't walk in alone. Zuri held his right hand, Amira held his left. They walked together, 3 figures across a floor once cold, now softened by intention. Isaiah wore no tie. Just a simple gray sweater and clean slacks. Nothing that said billionaire. Everything that said father. Mr. Brandt, his attorney, whispered, "You ready?" Isaiah didn't answer. He looked down at Zuri, whose paper crown had been left at home but whose chin was high. Then at Amira, whose grip was steady. "I'm not sure if ready's the word," he said. "But I'm here." The hearing began. Victor Hayes did not show up. No surprise. Desmond Ross sent in a letter, handwritten and notarized, formally withdrawing any claim to custody, ending with the words, "She's already home." The judge reviewed files for several long minutes. Then, "Mr. Coleman, you are requesting permanent guardianship of Amira and Zuri Ross. You understand the responsibilities this entails, legal, emotional, financial?" "Yes, Your Honor." "You are not a blood relative." "No." "You are not married nor cohabitating with a partner who can share parental duties." "Correct." "And yet you believe this is the best placement for them." Isaiah took a breath, then stepped forward. "Your Honor," he said slowly, "I've built 47 towers in 12 countries. I've managed teams across continents. But I never understood what a home was. Until 2 little girls knocked on my door in the middle of a snowstorm. The room stilled. "I thought staying busy would keep me from breaking," he continued. "But what I really needed was to be useful. Not to a board, not to a market, but to someone who needed me to stay." He looked at Amira. She nodded, just once. "They didn't come to me for money, or safety, or shelter. They came with one hope, that I wouldn't leave." He paused. "And I haven't." The judge looked down, then back up. "Do the children wish to remain with Mr. Coleman?" Amira stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you feel safe? Safer than anywhere else we've ever been? Do you wish to be adopted?" Amira glanced at Isaiah. He hadn't asked, hadn't brought it up, but her voice came sure and soft. "Not today, but maybe one day. What we have right now is already real." Zuri stood too. "Can we just keep living where the pancakes don't burn?" Laughter rippled gently through the room. The judge smiled. "Well then, effective immediately, the court grants Mr. Isaiah Coleman full legal custody of Amira and Zuri Ross." She tapped her gavel once. Isaiah didn't move. Not at first. But when Amira reached for his hand, he held it tight. Zuri jumped up and down, nearly knocking over a clerk's pen cup. Outside the courthouse, the wind was light and the sky blue. They stood on the marble steps, sun on their faces, and Isaiah looked not up, but within. Amira squeezed his hand. "Can I ask something?" "Of course." "Can I write my name as Amira Coleman now? Just sometimes. Just when it feels like home?" Isaiah knelt down. "You can write it every time. Or none. You get to decide what name carries you forward." She nodded slowly, then smiled. "Okay." They walked down the steps together, and for the first time in years, longer maybe, Isaiah realized he wasn't descending from something. He was walking into something permanent. The refrigerator door had become a kind of gallery. Julian's rocket ship still held its corner. Zuri's glitter crown drawing curled slightly at the edges but stood proud. Amira had recently added a sketch in pencil, the outline of 3 hands holding one another, no names, no faces, just fingers intertwined. But on this morning, something new appeared. Isaiah walked into the kitchen half awake, expecting the usual cereal mess and the scent of burnt toast. Instead, he found Zuri standing on a step stool, tongue poking out in concentration, taping something carefully to the freezer. "What's that?" he asked. She turned, eyes bright. "It's our house now." He looked closer. It was a drawing. Crayon, uneven, but careful. 3 people, tall, medium, and tiny, stood hand in hand before a large door. Above the door, in big crooked letters, it read, "No exit." Isaiah stared. "You know what that means?" he asked gently. Zuri nodded. "It means nobody leaves." Amira, now standing in the doorway with a bowl of fruit, added softly, "She didn't mean trapped. She meant safe." Isaiah felt something shift in his chest. A door inside him, long closed, rusted shut, creaked open. That afternoon, they planted a tree. It wasn't grand, just a sapling in a ceramic pot on the balcony. "We'll put it in the ground when we have a backyard someday," Amira said. "We already have one," Zuri countered. "It's just taller." Isaiah watched them fill the pot with soil, hands messy, cheeks flushed. He didn't tell them it would be hard to keep a tree alive on a 48th floor balcony. He didn't care, because the point wasn't the tree. It was planting something that stayed. Weeks passed. Photos went up on walls that had once been blank like hospital sheets. The guest room became a bedroom, then 2 bedrooms. Zuri began calling him Daddy, like it had always been that way. Amira called him Isaiah, until one night she didn't. It was a whisper. Half asleep. "Night, Dad." She didn't realize she'd said it. He didn't point it out. He just stood in the hallway a little longer, like it meant something holy. Then came the envelope, not in the mail, in a journal. Tucked between pages, Amira had started writing. It was hers, but it was addressed to him. A single page. Handwritten. "Dear Isaiah, you didn't ask for this. You didn't prepare for it. But you stayed. You gave us cereal and pancakes and warm socks. You gave us space and quiet and presence. You gave us a door that didn't lock behind us. A light that stayed on. A name we could say without fear. You didn't replace Mama. You didn't try. That's why it worked. I'm not good at saying things out loud, so I'll write it. You're not just someone who took us in. You're someone who let us in. That's rarer and braver. Love. Amira." Isaiah closed the journal and sat still for a long time. The city outside pulsed with noise, but inside his chest, something quiet bloomed. He rose, walked to the kitchen, and added one last magnet to the refrigerator. A small one. It simply said, "We stay." In the living room, Zuri had fallen asleep with her head in Amira's lap. A book rested on the floor. The television flickered soft, slow light. Isaiah sat on the armrest beside them, hand resting lightly on Zuri's shoulder. He looked over at the drawing, the one she'd made weeks ago. The door with "no exit," and he smiled. Because it was true. There was no way out anymore. But not because he was trapped. Because he had finally come home. Some people don't arrive to be heroes. They don't show up with fanfare or medals or grand gestures. They just stay. In a world that rushes to move on, sometimes the greatest miracle is a hand that doesn't let go. A heart that doesn't turn away. Isaiah Coleman didn't replace what was lost. He didn't erase grief. He simply opened the door and stayed. And for 2 girls once lost in the snow, that was enough to become a home. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this story. We know there are moments in life that leave us adrift, uncertain, unseen, or unloved. We hope this story is a gentle reminder. You don't need much. Just someone who stays, like Isaiah stayed for Amira and Zuri. If this story touched you, share it with someone who might need a quiet door left open, a whisper that says, "You are not invisible. I see you." We'll see you again in the next story.